Okay, so I thought I would just make a video talking about the books that I read this year. So this year was the year, well, not this year, it's 2026 now, but last year was the year I decided to get back into reading, just as a way of spending more time away from screens. And I was able to read, I think, 15 books last year, a little under what I wanted. But yeah, I used to have a different YouTube channel where I actually spoke about these books. And I figured I'm going to start talking about them again on this one, as it's not just going to be a programming. Sorry, I'm ill. It's not just going to be a programming YouTube channel, but also just more about things that interest me. So the first five books I actually read of the well, they weren't the first five, but the first five on this panel are the first five books to the Horus Heresy of the Warhammer 40k universe. And I was able to get the first five books no problem. And I gotta say, as works of fiction goes and sci-fi goes, these are some pretty fucking good books. If you enjoy fantasy, if you enjoy sci-fi, if you enjoy just fictional writing, and you like things where just big wars and violence and action, these books are amazing. The only issue with these books is that they are a series of about 60 books, and the first five are relatively easy to get your hands on. The issue being is that once you get past the first five, apparently they don't reprint them anymore. So you're kind of stuck in this situation where once you get past this book, Fulgrim, which was one of my favorite in the whole series, I really like the part where you learn about Fulgrim and his possession and how he actually falls to chaos. I'm not going to give full reviews of these books right now. And you kind of just left like, oh, shit's getting real. It's getting really good. And then as I read the next book, say, yeah, I'd love to read the next book. And then you realize the company that makes them, Games Workshop, doesn't print them anymore. If you want to get any more of these books, I think the cheapest you're looking at for like the next few are in the £30 range, while these ones are about £7 each. £7 each through the course of 60 odd books. That's going to cost a decent amount of money. I'm not that rich, but I could have afforded that. And not afford to read the rest of them unless I get lucky and find them cheap somehow. So I read the first five Horus Heresy books, and they're very good. Highly recommend them if you're into anything like that. But be warned, if you get past the first five and want to continue, it's going to be a lot harder because you're going to have to go just find people reselling the books. And the cheapest I could find was about £30 for the next one, which is a step up in price, especially when it's just a work of fiction. You're not learning anything from it. It's not actually giving you much back to your life. So, yeah, great books, but unfortunately had to stop reading them just because getting the rest of the series was a bit of an issue. If I happen to find them in the future, happily read them again. Oh, continue reading them. Next book on my list was this one, The Shallows, and how the internet changes the way we read and think and remember. I really like books like this. I like books that talk about humans and how we act, learn, and think. And this book is a book about neuroplasticity and how the tools we use alter the pathology of our mind, get our neurons wiring up differently, and how the internet, while it is a fantastic tool for finding sources of information, is a terrible tool for comprehension. And this is only being exacerbated by the use of ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. And there's studies coming out that show that if you use tools like the internet and all of these AIs to do your work, things will get done. You will find the information. But if you're trying to learn it and internalize it and become an expert in it, you don't get that connections in your brain. It doesn't stick in your mind. You don't retain the information. You have a like dissonance between the work you have. It's being shown that people who use these AIs don't see it as their own work. They see it as kind of like, oh, I kind of helped make it, but it's not really mine. Yeah, I kind of did it. So I really like this book when it talks about that stuff, and it talks about how books themselves. Maybe the author's a bit biased because they're books, but are a fantastic tool for that because books are inherently boring. There's about two things you can do for a book. You can read it, or if you hated somebody, you could throw it at them. But out of that, I know you could burn it if you were cold. Not much you can do for a book, but realistically speaking, you got a book, you're going to sit down, you're going to read it, and that's all you can do. Your attention is focused on the book. And that's it. And that is a fantastic environment for learning when it's just you and the material you're trying to learn. The internet itself, you can think that you're locked into the internet. Oh, I'm just going to read this article, but the article has links, it has videos, it has adverts. The computer you're sitting on has not just been for reading and learning, you've used it for everything within your life, to your finances, to your entertainment. So your brain is constantly making micro checks like, hey, is it time to check our bank? Is it time to watch YouTube? Is it time to scroll social media? When really you just want to be locked in. A book does not offer you that in the slightest. The only thing the book offers your mind is the ability to read it. Therefore, your mind kind of just calms down. It's like, right, all I can do is read it. Might as well read it. Don't worry about anything else. And yeah, I highly recommend this book if you're interested in the history kind of information technology, you're interested on learning more about the human mind. And yeah, that's all I got to say about that one. Let's move on to the next one. Next book was this one. I bought it on a whim because I go to Waterstones in England, and every 10 books you buy, you basically get one free. So I bought this one, 7 Brief Lessons on Physics. Fun fact, I'm not a mathematician. I know fuck all about physics. I just bought it because I liked the way the book looked and I wanted to read something that day. And it's short. I read it all in a couple of hours. It's like 70 pages. I think there was one thing that stuck out to this book with me, and the only thing I learned was apparently heat being energy and the way energy gets transferred between objects, it's like a probability. It's just more likely that something that is hot and its particles are moving around will transfer their energy to something that's cold and stationary. Yeah, that's all I learned from this one. But if you are interested in maths and you do understand physics, you'd probably really like this book. I can't speak much more on it because I'm not a mathematician or a physicist. But the book was, it's small. It was pretty cheap. I liked it. I learned at least one thing apparently about it. I'm sure if I was to study more, go back, I can kind of see the connection there. But I just don't have the education to really appreciate it. Next book, which was actually the first book I read this year. Sorry, Dying. And you can tell it's the first book I read this year because look, it's got all these little marks inside of it. I was going to be like, you know what? I'm going to read, I'm going to learn, I'm going to be super smart, I'm going to make notes on everything and study it. And if this book was something that I absolutely needed to know every inch of information from, this little method right here might have been okay. This takes for fucking ever to do, like making all these little notes and then having to go back and write it. Yeah, takes too long. I don't think I would have read half of what I read this year if this was the way I was doing it. So I actually decided, because The Shallows was the second book, you'll notice in The Shallows, like very early on, I was like, I ain't got time for it. I do not have time to be making these notes like that. So I might do this if I find something I really need to internalize. But yeah, this note taking thing, it was a happy, ambitious idea that did not follow through. Anyways, Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman is a very interesting book. I think it was written in the 1980s. And it is a book of the time it was written where he was trying to make the argument that serious public discourse should not be done through the medium of television. Now, television itself is purely a form of entertainment, and because of that, whenever you try to be serious and have a proper, meaningful discussion, that the medium itself distorts the message. The medium is the message, and that isn't from Neil Portsman, it's somebody else, but I forget who that quote can be attributed to. And I believe that this can be further, exasperated is the word, through the internet. It'd be very interesting to see this author do the book again, but on the internet. However, I do believe Neil Postman has since passed away, so we won't be getting that. But I do agree with a lot of what the book says. The arguments the book makes as to why television of the time was not good for these serious public discourses, these serious... when you're trying to talk about something serious, television needs to be entertaining, and you're also competing with every other channel on the television. One of the main drawbacks to TV when it comes to communication like this is it's a business. There's money to be made. Whilst talking like this is free. I can talk and I don't have to worry about anybody else competing for my time. But television, you only got 24 hours in a day, and a channel has to fill all of those slots. So if you're trying to get a message across, first of all, your message has to be condensed down into 15, 30 minutes or an hour. However big your time slot is, that is how long you got to get your message out. It doesn't matter if we might need to take 10 hours to actually properly convey the meaning of this message. You're going to have to cut some stuff out. You've only got whatever time the people who own the channel are going to give you. The second thing is because television is entertaining, and we're humans. We like entertaining things. We love getting addicted to entertaining things. Just look at gambling, the way video games have gone with all of their, quick, immediate feedback loops, short form content. And because of that, not only does your message need to be condensed down, you need to make it entertaining. Because if it isn't, somebody's just going to flick the channel and watch something else. Why would they watch your thing? The other thing is because you can't guarantee and somebody is going to actually start watching your thing. Don't know if it's going to be from the beginning, middle, or end when they're going to actually tune into the channel. Kind of have to keep the topic at the surface level. You can't really go dive in deep because you're getting into the real technical details of something that only a fraction of the population will be able to understand. It's not good for money. It's not good for business because somebody's going to click onto this. Like, oh wow, I'd really like to learn about neuroscience. And maybe you've got the greatest neuroscientist in the world talking right now, but he's going really in depth on this shit. He's talking about stuff that only people who have studied in the field for like 20 years might understand. Two people might watch that TV show, and then the rest of us are going to flick off because I don't get it. I'm lost. I'm off. I'm wasting my time here. So those are a few of the arguments why television itself is bad for public discourse because it is a medium of entertainment, and when you try to funnel your message through that, it needs to conform to that medium or being entertaining and being simple and easy to understand and digest. And I do believe, again, the whole logic behind that can be shown on the internet. So with short form content is the perfect example of that. If everybody wanted to sit down and really just study and learn on the internet, short form content would be dead. Nobody would care about it. But it's blown up massively because nobody really comes to the internet to like. We probably have great intentions. Everybody's done it, but it's just so much easier to just go. No, it's easy. Our brains like it. And that's probably another reason why the internet, again, combining with what this book talks about, why the internet isn't that great for learning. And videos probably aren't the best for learning. But, it's here to stay. People use them. I find this as a useful tool for my own learning because I'm just reiterating the things I've already gone over with my programming stuff. So as a tool like that, I find it useful to learn. I do find other YouTubers useful, like there's low level programming, there's the Primeagen, there's certain YouTubers that I watch where they talk about more technical details or they talk about the news that's going on in the industry. So I don't think it's entirely shit. But again, I one of the reasons I read so much is I think books are the better way for learning and not interact. Books are pretty bad for human interaction. But yeah, moving on to the next book, I had the Code Book by Simon Syme. I think that's how I pronounce his name. And this is the history of cryptology. If you are interested in cryptology and code breaking and cracking, you would find this book very interesting. If you are interested in mathematics, you would probably find this book very interesting. If you are interested in computer science, again, you'd probably find this book interesting as cryptography, blends into computer science towards the kind of middle-ish of World War II, was it, with Bletchley Park and Alan Turing and all the stuff that goes in there. If you mentioned the first electronical computer, I don't think it was the first general purpose computer, the first electronical one. I might be wrong on that. Anyways, I really enjoyed this book. Again, if you're just interested in history, this book is a good thing, part of history. So if you're interested in any of those topics, this book is a great just entry point and understanding to those things, especially when it comes to the code cracking, the history through it. It's quite fun. One thing I wasn't expecting out of this book, but obviously quantum computers are a thing. And I wasn't expecting that this book gives a very just naive explanation of quantum computers and how they work. If you just want a very, very general understanding of what they are and how they work, the last chapter of this book actually gives it to you. You're not going to be able to explain them to anybody in a serious manner. You're not going to be an expert on quantum computers, but this book actually, I wasn't expecting it. I now have a teachiness, like what they are and how they work and how their stuff can be applied. Apparently there's some algorithms already invented in quantum computers where you have just uncrackable codes. That was interesting. I also read this one. 1984 by George Orwell. I really enjoyed reading this book. I also really liked the cover because the book is like a chain of bookstores in England where Waterstones they're called, and a lot of like the classic books they have like this really nice covers to them all. Only thing I don't like is because I have these books in my bag. You can see here that black stuff isn't like sewn on, it's kind of just printed on. So if you carry these books around in a bag, that will rub off. But yeah, I I like this book. Again, it is a work of fiction, but it is also a pretty good way of kind of understanding of how a population might be controlled, censorship, how it gets used. So if inside of this like fantasy world there is INGSOC, English Socialism, and that has become the dominating governing body of pretty much all of Europe. And there's also Eurasia and Russia, I think it is. And they are like the three dominating forces. The other two are kind of like background characters, like the Russia side of it and Asia side of it. They're like, you hear mentions of them, you hear mentions of what's happening in Africa, but it's very brief. It's not that much. But the main focus of the book is within England, the United Kingdom, in a city. I can't remember if it's actually London. I can't remember what city they say they are in. And there is surveillance everywhere and there is censorship everywhere. Censorship to the point where they are trying to create a new language. They call it Newspeak. And this Newspeak, what they're theorizing is if you never teach the growing population, so the younger people in the population, certain words, they will never be able to properly express themselves and be able to critically think about stuff and challenge like what is going on. And I find that quite interesting and why it is important that people develop critical. Because if you remain uneducated, then when somebody says something and you don't know how to properly articulate yourself and form an argument and go, that's bullshit and here's why, that can be a hindrance in your own life. And it can also lead to places where people get in positions of power because nobody can challenge them. There's also, the issue of mass surveillance. There's no privacy within the world of 1984. And England as a country we believe we are the most surveilled country within Europe. I'm not sure if China is higher than us. But yeah, so surveillance is everywhere in this place, but to the point where it's like inside of your own home. Everybody has a television or some variation of a television, and this thing is constantly staring at you and monitoring you. And if you happen to say something against the party, who are the people who control the whole of, I believe, it's like the Americas and the Kingdom, then they come get you and they take you to the Ministry of Love. And I won't say too much. I don't want to actually spoil this book, but I do like the way the book can make you think about stuff like that. What happens if you take away people's ability to even speak? If you take away their language, their ability to communicate freely, if they constantly believe they're in a panopticon, I think it's called, where they're under constant surveillance, how it affects their psychology, their actions, choices that they make, how even though people are within that situation where the party is in complete control, how even though they're not allowed to freely express themselves, they don't have control of people's minds. So you learn a lot about the thoughts of the main character in this book because he can't freely express himself without getting captured. So yeah, if you like that type of dystopian fantasy or you just want to kind of think about stuff like that, that's a great book. It's not a new book, it's been around for a long time, so people will probably have already read it. Next two books that I read are two books on Stoicism. I once had a friend randomly say to me that you're quite stoic, and I've never ever paid attention to Stoicism, anything like that in my life, any form of philosophy. So I was in the shop and I decided, you know what, I'll go ahead and buy two books. The first one I actually bought was this one, The Lives of the Stoics, from Zenos to Marcus Aurelius. And I enjoyed this book. This is like a history book, to be honest with you. It's not really about Stoicism. If you're interested in learning Stoicism, this book wouldn't actually teach you too much about how to live the life of a Stoic, but it does teach you the history and the people behind Stoicism, as it says, all the way up to Marcus Aurelius. And I found it very interesting. One thing I find interesting about both these books, I also have this one over here. I've not actually read this one, which is Marcus Aurelius' own book. It's interesting how few things actually change. Things that they talk about, think about, feel. And we know this through the surviving of their writings, or people made references to the early Stoics in their own writings, which is kind of why we know these people existed. And they're talking about, friends, family, land ownership, war, whether you want to side with somebody like Caesar, because Caesar was a very real person, especially in their times. He was a very real guy, and it was a thing that some people had to confront. And it was interesting to see how, things don't change. They had the same problems a lot of us have today. We have different problems now with all the technology and stuff, and how we don't really have much community or culture left in our modern day societies. But yeah, I really find it interesting. Put things into perspective for you. And from what I've learned about reading these books, so this book is a little bit more about Stoicism itself. and talks about various people throughout history who have shown certain stoic traits. I don't think it's that bad way of living a life. It seems to be. I might butcher this myself because I have just read them. I didn't really try to internalize much of it, but essentially it is about focusing on the things that you control. I think there's a famous example, especially in this one, of a slave named Epictetus. And this guy was born a slave back in the day. If you're born into slavery, apparently you had to be a slave all the way up until I think you turn an adult, and then you're giving your freedom given to you. Strange system, but that's the way the times worked back then. And because this person, Epictetus, was born into slavery, he had no control over that. So there was essentially no point in worrying about it. I'm sure deep down, maybe they didn't express it externally. You'd probably be thinking, well, fuck me, this is shit. But I guess the idea is you accept it for what it is and you take control over what you can. You take perfection in your actions, that you have control of the choices that you make, the words that you say, the people you align yourself with. You stay away from things that you just inherently know are bad for you. Excessive drinking, gluttony, not exercising. There's a line in this book somewhere which I found was funny, again, just to parallel the modern world, where there was some guy in Rome went somewhere and he made some quip about how these people have traded their gymnasiums in for baths. In other words, they're getting fat and lazy, they're getting too comfortable. And you see that again today, especially like in the gym bro mentality side of YouTube, where people have similar sayings. So I find that interesting. And another quote I actually really like from this one, I think it maybe came from this book, was that no, how'd it go? There's something along the lines that no, it was like no matter how simple the job, if done with intention and perfection, no work is beneath another human. And I kind of like that because obviously, especially in the day of the modern age, we are bombarded with the lives of celebrity people who were just born into luxury and had everything given to them. And granted, there are some of them that did put a tremendous amount of work into their lives to get there, but still you're confronted with them. If you use social media, well, I no longer do. I've deleted all of my social media. This is like my only connection kind of to the online world these days. But it can be a lot for the human mind to take in to constantly see people just seemingly so much better than, wow, I need that, I need that. Oh, look at me, I'm doing this right now. This is shit, this is worthless, this is beneath me. And fair enough, if you have ambitions, there's no harm in going for them and trying to be better. You should always be trying to better yourself, I think. But there's no reason to think less of yourself now for the job that you're doing. Just do it as good as you can. Like, show up the work, accept it for what it is for now, and just try to be the best you can. Make that day the best it is. And, slowly but surely have plans to move on to the things you want in your life. Yeah, I both liked these two books. I think I like this one more, the history book one more. Um, this one I find interesting. Like I said, I wasn't really reading these to become a stoic or anything. Somebody just mentioned it to me. I guess I can see some parallels to myself in those books and that kind of way of thinking. Moving on to the only book I did not like. So I read this book this year. The cover is a bit scuffed just because I had some issues in my bag. I had another issue as well. So I carry these crappy like food plastic things in my bag when I go to work. And one of them just like cracked open. So this one was actually off of blueberries. They kind of just got messed up in my bag. And the other one, unfortunately, was like it was some type of pasta that I had in my bag, and it was the book on the Financial Times Stock Exchange, so the FTSE, the history of the FTSE, how it came about. I was mostly finished with that book, but it just got destroyed, so I had to throw it away, which is why it's not on the pile, and I never actually got to finish it, so oh well. But this book, like I said, I did not like this book. This is the only book I read this year where I was reading it and I was thinking to myself, this is a load of shit, to be honest. So it is Scary Smart, and it is written by Mo Gaudat, and he is an ex-Google employee. He's being in Silicon Valley, and to be honest, it comes off very tech bro-y or hippie, I guess, at the time. Like his solution to the problem of AI is literally just fall in love with the machines. There's lines in this book where he talks about, if you're feeling comfortable and you're in a safe space, tell your phone you love it. Like that is a direct quote from the book, more or less, and like an actual thing he's telling you to do. Tell your phone you love it. Tell your laptop you love it. If Google Maps sends you to the wrong place and you end up in a traffic jam, apologize to Google Maps. And it's like treating these things as if they're actually children. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong. I think he wants to be good. I don't think he wants to be. He does seem like an actual good guy. I don't have anything against the author himself, but the way he came about, there was no solution given in this book. There was no solution to AI. Like, you roll over and just love the machine. It's basically like just saying, yeah, just love Google, love Microsoft, love Facebook. They're making the future. Just, yeah, just push it off. Don't worry about it. Just accept it for what it is. And I think that's a load of shit. I honestly greatly disagree with the things in this book. He also talks about AI as if it's actually going to be vengeful towards it, that it's going to go full Terminator on us. There's a type of algorithm called that we use in reinforcement learning when it comes to artificial intelligence, and essentially you have some algorithm and you give it a task, and then it tries to perform that task. Now, to speed up the task, instead of just having one AI at a time, you make hundreds, thousands of them, and you tell them all to try and do this task. And they're all kind of just randomly generated at the beginning. They're all going to be shit because it's randomness. A few of them are going to be less shit. So then all you do is you get rid of the ones that are the worst. You keep like the top 10%, and then you make clones of them and so on and so forth. That's a very brief kind of description of how that works. And all you essentially do is delete the lines of code that generated the bad ones. You delete the files that contain the data for the bad ones. And he equates that to actually murdering artificial intelligence, to actually killing a living thing, to actually torturing these things as if they're actually sentient, living, breathing, functioning life forms. They're not just lines of code being executed on a CPU or a GPU. And again, I feel like that is just a load of shit. And he says that, an AI, it's going to remember this when it becomes this big, dominating, global, all-encompassing force. And it's going to punish us for it. It's going to kill us like a fly because we tortured it in its early days. And it's just like, you know what? If a general artificial intelligence does exist and something so much smarter than human comes into existence, isn't it also going to be aware that these weren't living, breathing things, that these were just lines of code and text files being executed on silicon? Like, it's not going to give a shit. It wouldn't, because I'm not an expert in AI. I've understood it. I studied at university. And even I can be like, yeah, this isn't real intelligence. These are just lines of code. So if this thing that's going to be so much smarter than me is going to look back and be angry at past actions of humans, also angry at humans that have nothing to do with it. Like, fair enough if you focus on the AI scientists that were doing it, but it's like, oh, it's going to kill us. It's going to hurt us all. It's like, no, I don't buy it. I think it's, yeah, bad. So down to the final two books that I read this year. The other one is, because I just like reading a wide range of books, is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I just read this book out of curiosity. I heard it before. I've heard people say high praises of it. And I think that if you have absolutely zero financial education, this book is not a bad way to start your little journey. I do not believe reading this book is going to automatically make you rich. I do believe why some people might absolutely love this book. If you are very much into the money game, like you are like, fuck, I want money, I want to be rich, I want to be the millionaire, the billionaire. I think that reading books like this probably aligns very well with you as a person. So I can definitely see why people very much do like this book. I don't think there's any bad advice in this book. But I think if you're more of just a normal down to earth person, you don't particularly care about becoming the richest guy in the world. I would say, it's not a bad book. There's no terrible advice into it. He talks about getting, like, actually building up assets, acquiring things that generate you money and keeping your liabilities low. If you get a bigger paycheck next year, don't go, great, I can afford a more expensive car, I can start renting a more expensive place. Just keep your basic lifestyle, use that extra influx of cash to then start purchasing assets, be it stocks, bonds, actual property, gold, silver, just something that out there that can generate you money coming back into yourself. He also talks about how if you have an actual want and a real drive for it, then yeah, go into business, like actually try to own your own businesses. But the advice is also like, if your heart isn't really in it, like if you're just somebody like, I don't care about owning a business, I don't want to be a business owner. Maybe I just want to be a carpenter, like working with wood. And it's like, great, go make furniture. Everybody needs a place to sit. Don't try to be the CEO of Google. Because your heart's not in it, your drive's not in it. There's no shame in not being like these certain types of people. And it also talks about when it comes to what you put your money in, he doesn't say do the X, Y, and Z, do this. He gives examples from his own life because that's all he can do. And through his lens, it is property. Because back in his day, property was a great thing to invest in. I'm not in the property market right now, but I believe in the last 70 years, properties in England have gone up like 151 times in value. My parents' first house cost 16 grand. And that was a 3-bedroom house with a loft and a big backyard and a front garden and a garage. So I can fully understand why somebody in his era would have went into property. That's not bad advice, but he does give the advice that whatever you put your money into, at least be interested in it, have it be something that you understand, you want to learn about. And if you're not willing to do that and willing to put in the work on this particular thing that could make you money, probably just pick the safer routes, just safe stock investments, index funds, pensions, bonds, safer things. But if you do have the drive for money, you do have things that you're generally interested in, and you're willing to put in the work. Talks about how he would drive around neighborhoods all the time, and he would go check the property values. Like, oh, how much is this neighborhood worth? And yeah, well, that house is 30 grand. That house is, and then one day he might go by and somebody's having a rough time and they just need to get out of town and go somewhere. He's like, I'm selling this place for 15 grand. And he goes, great, I'll buy it off you now for cash. So you can see how we put in efforts to acquire what he did. So yeah, I've got nothing bad to say about this book. I don't believe, like I said, I don't believe just reading the book alone, it's not going to change your life. It's not going to make you some instant billionaire. If you are the type of person who does really want to be an entrepreneur, get into the money game, become as rich as you can, I can 100% understand why reading books like this is good for you. I do believe reading things that do confirm your own biases, like, yeah, this is the right thing to do, it can be motivating, and there's also no bad advice in the book, in my opinion. So yeah, I would say overall, if you're looking to get somewhat of a financial education, I would read this book. He also talks about, tax law. Like, whatever country you live in, go learn the laws of your country. Go learn about tax. You're not being taught that in school. Unless you go to some fancy school. Maybe they teach you that. I was a school dropout. I didn't know nothing about tax. But yeah, overall, I'd give it a yeah, read it. There's nothing against it. And the final book that I read this year was The Thinking Machine. So this is sort of Jensen Huang's biography. And I enjoyed this book, not necessarily because I enjoyed learning about Jensen Huang that much. I picked this book up on a whim. All I saw was this on the bookshelf, and I just decided to think no more. I just picked it up and I bought it. I tend to like most things I read, so I just picked it up. I didn't even know it was about NVIDIA and Jensen Huang. I really enjoyed this book from a historic standpoint. I like seeing the origins of the company and how it turned into what it did today. Didn't care too much to learn that much about Jensen. He's a guy in the world. I'm never going to meet him. He's never going to know I exist. So I don't really jump on the celebrity bandwagon on things. But overall, I was very interested in seeing how NVIDIA went from the graphics accelerator to how the term GPU even came into existence. Assuming everything in this book is true, it turns out that GPU was just a term coined by NVIDIA because they wanted to compete in an area where they were number one in. And one way to do that, it was they just invented their own thing. They were making graphics accelerators, and then one day, I'm guessing somebody in their marketing team phoned up the big tech suppliers, reviews, and companies and said, yo, we've got the world's first GPU. We've got the world's first graphics processing unit. And they all just loved the marketing, I guess, jumped on board of it. Probably give good headlines that GPU comes into existence. And because this was a brand new thing, NVIDIA were the only people who were competing in it because they made it up. They were number one in the market. Pretty good. Smart idea, to be honest, and it worked out for them. And it's interesting to see how AI, like how they looked out. They looked out very much with large language models because Jensen Huang, seemingly as a business strategist, as his mind kind of works, is always looking for like fringe sides of the market to kind of get hooks into. And one of those was developing parallel processing and also making it available to the scientific community. Because obviously they are called graphics processing units because originally they were just designed around graphics for video games. We needed faster ways to render triangles, so these games would be playable at in better frame rate and also be able to develop better graphics as time goes on. But turns out, these GPUs, they're very, very fast little computing units, and they can do lots of parallel programming so much better than the CPU. And there's certain problems in this world when it comes to like particle simulations, these large language models, again, the graphical stuff, where having this parallelism, it's fantastic. And I forget if the book said he was already thinking of making CUDA a thing, But it was mentioned that there were certain scientists who saw the potential of the GPU to do all of their calculations for them, and they essentially just like rigged these graphics processing units to do their calculations, even though they were just meant to display triangles. There were some very clever people, very good mathematicians, programmers working on these things, and they figured out a way to make these triangle calculations work in their advantage for their own calculations. So you'd probably, if you displayed what it was showing, it would just be a garbled mess of graphics on the screen, but it was actually having some meaningful output for them. And I can't remember if the book says Jensen caught wind of that and was like, ooh, that's a market we can capitalize on. Let's find a way to allow these people to interface with our GPUs a lot easier than what they're doing right now. Or I can't remember if CUDA was already becoming a thing as this was happening in parallel to it. I can't remember that one. But essentially that led to the development of CUDA. So we have graphics APIs like Metal, OpenGL, DirectX, Vulkan, and these are all ways that we can interface with the graphics card to do what a graphics card was originally designed to do, to render graphics on a window on our screens, so people can see what's happening on a graphical user interface within the graphics in a game. And CUDA was essentially like a different mode to the graphics card. Instead of saying, hey, I needed to render graphics, it's described as a switch. You essentially flick a switch, not a real switch, not like a on your graphics card, like a computational switch, a little binary switch that goes, right, we're switching into scientific mode. These calculations are not going to be for graphics. You're going to be giving some data, some large amount of numbers. You just need to crunch through these numbers, then give them back. So you have a compute shader. And I found that really interesting to see how that all came about and how AI wasn't really a thing on his mind, on his list. Neural networks were originally seen as shit. Some people developed neural networks in the early days of AI and they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. Kind of shit though, isn't it? Doesn't do much. Or if you wanted to do much, it takes so much power, so much energy, so much time to train. It's like so bad. So a lot of the scientific mathematical community discarded neural networks as a serious form of AI. They were kind of shunned at the time, where it's like, yeah, we've been there, we tried it, they're crap. But it turns out these neural networks, because they use matrix multiplications, and matrix multiplications can be executed on the GPU very, very rapidly, that there's just luck, be it that CUDA and neural networks found a perfect marriage together. And they were able to accelerate neural networks to such an extent where they became, oh, they're everything that we think AI could be. And, it kind of leads us to the current day where a lot of AI right now is these large language models, which is probably an unfortunate thing that these large language models are the main way people are interacting with AI, because AI is a much broader subject. It's in a lot more things, and it's not just these silly little chat but yeah, I really liked it for that one. Didn't care too much about learning about Jensen. Like I said, I'm not into celebrities. Apparently has a habit of screaming at people at his workplace. I'm not sure I would deal with that too well if I just had my boss intentionally waiting for me to be covered around my peers, then start screaming at me. I'd probably just tell him to go fuck himself and just quit. Money isn't worth disrespect. But other than that, yeah, those were the books that I read this year, and a quick kind of review and topic on them. And the next few books that I plan on reading, I already have. I kind of read books in parallel to each other. I don't just read one book all the way through these days. I kind of like pick up a bit, read some of this, read some of that. I don't know. It's just how I've been reading these last couple of months. But my next book, or my next few books that are on my list, are continuation of Stoicism, learning about Marcus Aurelius. And again, this is interesting that it is actual Marcus Aurelius' own words from his private journal. I never knew this. He never intended when he was writing this for anybody to read this. It just happens that when he died, somebody long ago found his journals and were like, you know what, we should preserve these. And then sometime later on, they're like, we should publish them. We should let people read them. So if you've ever wondered what a Roman emperor actually thought about, yeah, this is literally what he thought about. And again, I just started reading it, so the first part of this book is kind of a history lesson. But when it comes to like, I've just started reading the actual bit that are his own words. And it's interesting because, again, he comes off as just a guy in the first few bits that I've read where he's just like writing how grateful he is for having a good wife, having good parents to bring him up, having his foster, I think it was his uncle that fostered him, then his uncle died. And then because of that, he became emperor. He was like fostered into the royal family. He wasn't originally a part of it. And how, yeah, so like just how thankful he is for the people that are within his life and certain things like that. It's like, you know what? It's just a guy living in the modern world, really. So it's interesting again how things don't really change that much. We do have different problems, but a lot of the problems of just being a human are the same as they've ever been. And the next three books that I have is actually a mistake. This was supposed to be a trilogy, and I thought this was the final book in the trilogy, but it turns out this is like an anthology. It's just a short stories based in the same world. So I've ended up buying the first two books of The Neuromancer. The Neuromancer, to my understanding, is the very first origins of cyberpunk. This is apparently the first work of fiction that really created like the cyberpunkery universe. And I can believe it because obviously there's a game called Cyberpunk. I've never played it myself, but I've seen a few videos on it. And in Cyberpunk, there is the city, there's Night City. And guess what? Night City is in this book. People with bionic enhancements are inside of this book. People who can like get sort of implants in their livers and lungs and pancreas so drugs don't affect them are in this book. People with claws and knives in the hands are in this book. People have like augments in their eyes so they can see in the dark. They're in this book. So this does seem like the original origin of the kind of sci-fi cyberpunk style universe, which I've only read the first couple of chapters. Not into it that much, but from what I've read, I think I'm going to enjoy it. I do need to go about actually buying the last book in the trilogy because, like I said, the other one is just an anthology. It doesn't follow the same story. The next book is called Don't Say Mmm. And this is basically a speech therapy book, I guess. Because, on a personal note, growing up, I really struggled with just communicating, articulating myself, talking in general. I think that's partly because I was brought up in a foreign country. Que me he echado mucho de mi vida en España. And I basically learned two halves of two languages. I kind of learned English and I kind of learned Spanish, but I was a bit of a recluse. Every chance I got not to partake in the world, I ran away to video games. And when I was older, I ran away to alcohol instead, and that was a mistake in my own part of my own life. But one of the things I've always tried to make efforts on doing since I've, matured, grown up, realized that, hey, if you want a life, got to go out and get it yourself, is working on the talking and articulating myself. These YouTube videos are a way to do that for me. Just try to speak unbroken thoughts, no editing or anything like that. Just talk. And I think it's a good practice. And another part of that is books like this. Essentially, it is 10. I think it's 10 like exercising do that should hopefully theoretically lead to you being more an articulate person. Yeah, so that's all this book is. I will read it, I'll practice it, and I might give a review on it. See how well it works for me. The next one is, I think it's just basically a self-help book. Fuck being humble. It's about advertising yourself, your personal brand. How disgusting is that word? So yeah, I don't know much about this book. I've only read the first little bit. The very first little bit I have read seems like the advice might actually be down to earth. They give an example of a person who wanted to do something in their life, some type of company, and right now this person is apparently doing it just like on the side. It's the thing that they love in their life, but they've come to the conclusion, at least right now, they can't make a full-time living doing it. And that was the advice in the book, like, hey, don't just follow your dreams, okay? You need money. So don't just drop what you're doing and run away if you don't have a safety net to catch you. It could fucking blow up in your face. Maybe there's some parts of some people's lives where they just need to do that. But the advice with the book is like, you know what, if you want to do this, try doing it for free for a bit. Try to see if you even enjoy it, see if you want it. So just based on that little bit of a line there where it was kind of like grounded advice, I think I might enjoy this book. But yeah, that is the next one on my reading list. And then there's this one, The Empire of AI, Inside the Reckless Race from Total Domination. So this, at first when I was reading it, I thought it was just going to be a book glazing Sam Altman, and it was just going to be like, hey, this guy's amazing. Look at this guy. Look at AI. Look how cool it is. Because again, I don't read the blurbs and stuff. I do literally just look at covers of books sometimes. Oh, that looks cool. So I started reading it, and it seems like kind of a grounded critique of the current AI industry, whilst also having factual sources from interviews from other people who actually work in Silicon Valley. And yeah, I can't speak too much more about it because I've only read a little bit about it. But from what I've read, I think I kind of like the style the author's taken, where it's not just putting all these people on pedestals and going, look how amazing they are. It's actually taking a grounded response where this person did this, and it's kind of being shitty. where Sam Altman seems to be a bit of a liar, where he will just say what he thinks people want to hear in order to get what he wants. Elon Musk, obviously, is going to show up inside in this book and all that. So yeah, I'll read this book and probably just talk about it later. So those are the books that I read this year, and those are the few books that I plan on reading in the coming months. Anyways, Happy New Year. Hope you all had a good time. I got infected by my little nephews, why I'm very ill. But all in all, if you watch this far, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.